Most people think they'd survive medieval torture, but level 3 broke hardened warriors within hours. You probably wouldn't make it past level 2. What happens at level 7 was so brutal that even executioners refused to perform it. Think you're tough enough to find out where you'd tap out? Getting locked in the stocks was basically medieval Twitter shaming, except your ankles were trapped and people threw actual garbage at your face instead of harsh comments. But here's the thing about medieval justice. They weren't always trying to kill you. Sometimes they just wanted to make you really, really embarrassed. The stocks were wooden boards with holes cut out for your feet and sometimes your hands too. Guards would lock you in right there in the town square where everyone did their shopping, gossiping, and daily business. You became the day's entertainment. Think of it as the world's worst reality TV show, except you couldn't change the channel and you were the unwilling star. What landed you in this humiliating situation? Well, the crimes were pretty tame by today's standards. Spreading rumors about your neighbor, being drunk and obnoxious on a Tuesday, cheating customers at the market, basic bad behavior that annoyed the community but didn't exactly threaten national security. Here's where it gets interesting though. The punishment actually fit the crime in a weird way. Since most of these offenses involve bothering other people, the community got their revenge by bothering you right back. Fair trade, right? Locals would gather around and let you have it. Rotten vegetables were the classic choice, but creative townsfolk might throw mud, small stones, or whatever smelly refuse they had handy. The experience wasn't exactly pleasant. Your back would ache from being bent over. Your feet would go numb. The smell of decomposing cabbage in your hair wasn't great either, but most people walked away after a few hours with nothing worse than wounded pride and the need for a serious bath. Some unlucky folks got sentenced to longer stretches, maybe a full day if they'd really ticked off the wrong person. That's when things got a bit more serious. Sitting in the same position for hours could cause real pain. Dehydration became an issue, and if the weather was particularly hot or cold, you'd feel every minute of it. But here's the brilliant part about medieval crowd psychology. Most people weren't actually trying to seriously hurt you. They wanted to shame you, make you think twice about your behavior, and maybe get a few laughs with their neighbors. It was community justice with a built-in safety valve. The guy who cheated you on bread prices last week might throw a turnip at your head, but he probably wasn't aiming to knock you unconscious. The stocks worked because they attacked something medieval people cared about deeply, their reputation in the community. Everyone knew everyone else's business in these small towns. Being publicly humiliated meant months of whispers, pointed fingers, and awkward conversations. Some folks said that was worse than the physical discomfort. Most people survived the stocks just fine, though they definitely learned their lesson about community standards. It was medieval justice at its most basic level, uncomfortable, embarrassing, but survivable. However, not every medieval punishment was quite so forgiving. Some were designed to do much more than bruise your ego. You know what's interesting about medieval justice? Sometimes they actually tried to be reasonable. Well, reasonable by their standards anyway. Enter Vergild, probably the most civilized punishment system the Middle Ages ever produced. Vergild literally means man price in Old English. Instead of chopping off body parts or dragging you through the streets, Anglo-Saxon communities figured out something revolutionary. Make the criminal pay money to fix the problem. Revolutionary for the 11th century, that is. Here's how it worked. You punch someone, pay them, steal their cow, replace it with interest, kill their brother? Well, that's going to cost you a lot. The genius part wasn't just the payment system, it was that every single person had a specific price attached to their life based on their social class. A nobleman's life might be worth 200 shillings. A regular farmer, maybe 200 shillings. A slave, sometimes as little as 60 shillings. Cold? Absolutely. But it prevented something much worse. Blood feuds that could wipe out entire families for generations. The weird part is how precise these calculations got. Lost someone's eye? That's half their Vergild value. Cut off a thumb? Different price than a pinky finger. They had charts for everything. Medieval lawyers would have been proud. But here's the catch. You actually had to have the money. Rich criminals could literally get away with murder by opening their wallets. Poor folks, they were stuck with whatever horrible punishment came next if they couldn't pay up. Makes sense, right? The system wasn't exactly built for equality. Then there's the family aspect. Your entire extended family was expected to chip in for your Vergild payment. Mess up badly enough, and you'd have angry cousins demanding to know why they're selling their livestock to save your neck. Family reunions must have been awkward after that. The brilliant thing about Vergild was that it actually worked. Communities stayed relatively peaceful because everyone knew the exact cost of their actions up front. No surprises, no arbitrary punishments based on the judge's mood that morning. Just cold, hard math. Anglo-Saxon England used this system for centuries before the Normans showed up in 1066 and decided they preferred more theatrical approaches to justice. William the Conqueror took one look at this reasonable payment system and basically said, "Where's the spectacle in that?" Some criminals actually preferred Vergild to the alternative punishments. Pay your fine, apologize publicly, and move on with your life. Your reputation might take a hit, but your body parts stayed attached. Your family might be broke, but at least they weren't planning your funeral. The system wasn't perfect, but compared to what came before and after, Vergild was practically enlightened. Unfortunately for medieval criminals, enlightenment didn't last long in those dark times. Speaking of theatrical justice, the Normans brought with them punishments designed not just to hurt, but to humiliate in ways that made simple fines look like paradise. After surviving the stocks and maybe scraping together enough coins to pay your way out of trouble, things get nastier. Much nastier. Welcome to the whip, where medieval justice literally left its mark on your back. Public whipping wasn't just about pain, though there was plenty of that. It was theater. The whole town would gather in the square like they were watching some twisted sporting event. Men, women, children, even the local priest might show up to watch justice being served. And you? You were the star of this bloody show. The number of lashes depended on what you'd done wrong. Steal a loaf of bread? Maybe 10 lashes? Get caught in a bar fight? 20? Sleep with someone's wife? Well, let's just say you'd be counting a lot higher. The executioner, because that's who usually handled the whipping, would strip you to the waist and tie your hands to a post. Then came the leather. But here's the thing about medieval whips. They weren't just simple strips of leather. Many had metal studs woven in, or multiple tails that could wrap around your ribs. Some sadistic towns used whips with small pieces of bone or metal attached to the ends. Each strike didn't just hurt, it tore flesh away from your body like a hungry animal taking bites. The psychological torture matched the physical pain. Every crack of the whip sent the crowd into cheers or gasps. Your neighbors, people you'd known for years, were watching you bleed and scream. Some threw insults, others just stared. The humiliation burned almost as much as the wounds on your back. Most people survived whipping, but survival came with a price. Deep scars crisscrossed your back for life, marking you as a criminal. In a world where everyone knew everyone else's business, those scars followed you everywhere. Try getting work as a farmhand when everyone could see the raised welts across your shoulders. Try finding a wife when your back looked like a roadmap of bad decisions. The healing process was brutal too. Medieval medicine wasn't exactly advanced. No antibiotics, no proper bandages, certainly no pain medication. You'd wrap your wounds in whatever cloth you could find and hope infection didn't set in. Many people developed fevers that lasted weeks. Some wounds never properly healed, leaving open sores that oozed and attracted flies. What made whipping particularly cruel was its efficiency. The whole punishment took maybe 30 minutes from start to finish, quick, bloody, and guaranteed to leave a lasting impression on both the victim and anyone watching. Towns loved it because it didn't require expensive equipment or lengthy trials. Just a whip, a post, and someone strong enough to swing leather at human flesh. Medieval communities used whipping to control behavior in ways that went beyond simple punishment. It was a warning system written in scars and screams. But if you thought having your back torn open was as bad as medieval justice could get, you'd be tragically wrong. Some punishments targeted more than just your body. They went after your ability to breathe. You thought the stocks were embarrassing? Well, medieval folks had another creative way to humiliate people, especially women who talked too much or practiced what neighbors called witchcraft. Enter the ducking stool, a punishment that combined public shame with the very real terror of drowning. The ducking stool looked innocent enough. Just a wooden chair attached to a long pole, positioned right over the town's river, pond, or whatever murky water source happened to be handy. But here's where things got medieval-level cruel. The accused woman, and yes, it was almost always women, got tied tightly to that chair while the entire town gathered to watch the show. What happened next was part theater, part torture. The operator would slowly lower the chair into the water, dunking the victim completely under. Not just once, mind you. This process repeated over and over until the crowd got satisfied or the woman nearly drowned. Sometimes the dunking lasted just a few terrifying minutes. Other times, hours. The real horror wasn't just the water rushing into your lungs or the panic of not knowing when you'd surface again. It was the complete helplessness. Tied to that chair, you couldn't fight back, couldn't swim, couldn't even flail your arms. You just had to trust that whoever controlled the pole would pull you up before your lungs gave out. Communities used ducking stools to control what they saw as problematic women. Accused of gossiping too much, dunk. Suspected of casting spells on the neighbor's cow, dunk. Failed to keep your husband happy? You guessed it, straight to the river. The logic was twisted but simple. If you survived multiple dunkings, you were innocent. If you drowned, well, at least the problem was solved. Most victims did survive, though not without lasting damage. Many developed lung infections from the filthy water. Others never recovered from the psychological trauma of repeatedly facing death while their neighbors cheered. The lucky ones just caught pneumonia and called it a day. But here's the really twisted part. Some communities turned ducking into a public holiday. Vendors sold food, families brought their children, and the whole event became a festival of humiliation. Nothing brought medieval folks together quite like watching someone else's misery. The ducking stool worked because it delivered maximum shame with plausible deniability. Town leaders could claim they weren't really trying to kill anyone, just teaching a lesson. If someone died, well, that was God's will, not murder. Convenient, right? The worst part? Many victims were just women who refused to stay quiet or follow social rules. In a world where speaking your mind could literally be a death sentence, the ducking stool kept entire communities in line through fear. Yet, as terrifying as nearly drowning in public sounds, it was still considered merciful compared to what medieval justice had in store for more serious offenses. Because if you thought being dunked was bad, wait until you see what they did to people who really made them angry. You survived the ducking stool? Well, don't get too comfortable yet. The medieval justice system had another crowd favorite waiting in town squares across Europe. Meet the pillory, a wooden frame that trapped your head and hands while leaving the rest of your body completely exposed to whatever the locals felt like throwing. Unlike the ducking stool's quick dunks, the pillory was all about endurance. Hours stretched into what felt like days as you stood there, bent forward at an awkward angle, unable to move or protect yourself. Your neck cramped, your back ached. But the real torture, the enthusiastic participation of your neighbors, medieval crowds treated pilloried criminals like human dartboards. Rotten eggs were the classic choice, sure, but people got creative. Spoiled fish, animal waste, chunks of moldy bread, anything disgusting and readily available became ammunition. Some towns even had vendors selling pillory specials to maximize the humiliation. Talk about turning punishment into profit. The wooden stocks came in different designs, but they all served the same purpose, making you completely helpless. Your head went through the middle hole, hands through the smaller ones on either side. Once that top board clamped down, you weren't going anywhere. The wood was rough, splinters dug into your skin, and the constant pressure left marks that lasted weeks. But here's where things got dangerous. While most people stuck to throwing soft, disgusting items, others aimed to actually hurt you. Stones flew through the air, broken pottery, sometimes even sharp objects. Guards were supposed to prevent serious injury, but they often looked the other way if the crowd got carried away. After all, you were there for a reason, right? The psychological damage often exceeded the physical pain. Standing there for 6 to 12 hours, covered in filth while everyone you knew jeered and pointed, that kind of public shaming stuck with people forever. Your reputation in the community was essentially destroyed. Neighbors would remember seeing you in the pillory long after your wounds healed. Weather made everything worse. Summer heat baked the thrown filth onto your skin and clothes. Winter cold numbed your exposed body while you couldn't move to stay warm. Rain turned the rotting mess into a slimy coating that attracted flies and other insects. There was no relief, no escape, just standing there taking whatever came your way. Some people developed infections from cuts caused by thrown objects. Others suffered permanent neck or back problems from the awkward positioning. The lucky ones just dealt with severe dehydration and exhaustion. But most survived, which was exactly the point. Dead criminals can't serve as ongoing examples to the community. Medieval authorities loved the pillory because it was cheap, reusable, and entertaining for the masses. Public punishment doubled as public spectacle, keeping everyone happy while supposedly deterring future crimes. Yet even the pillory's hours of misery pale in comparison to what medieval justice had in store for more serious offenders. Sometimes the real torture came from what people put on your head rather than what they threw at it. The ducking stool was child's play compared to what medieval authorities had in store for women who just couldn't keep their mouths shut. Enter the Brank's bridle, also known as the scold's bridle. This contraption looked like someone crossed a birdcage with a torture device and decided, perfect, let's put this on someone's head. The bridle was an iron mask that completely enclosed the victim's head. But here's where it gets nasty. A metal plate or spike pressed down on the tongue, making speech impossible. Some versions had sharp bits that would cut the tongue if the woman tried to talk. Others featured bells attached to the outside so everyone could hear the victim coming and know exactly what her crime was. This punishment was almost exclusively used on women. The charges? Nagging their husbands, gossiping about neighbors, speaking out of turn in church. Basically, existing as a woman with opinions in medieval society. The authorities called these women scolds, and apparently the solution was literal muzzling. The process was deliberately humiliating. First, the woman would be dragged to the town center where everyone could watch. Then, the iron mask would be locked onto her head, often requiring multiple people to hold her down. The metal was cold, heavy, and designed to cause maximum discomfort. The weight alone could cause neck strain after just a few minutes. Once secured, she'd be paraded through the streets like a performing animal. Sometimes she was chained to a post in the market square for hours. Other times, she was led door to door so her neighbors could see the consequences of female defiance. The psychological torture was just as brutal as the physical pain. The tongue plate caused immediate agony. Swallowing became difficult. Saliva would pool and drip from the mask's openings, adding to the humiliation. Many women couldn't eat or drink properly while wearing the bridle, leading to dehydration and weakness during longer sentences. Some masks had additional features that would make your skin crawl. Sharp spikes lined the interior, ready to puncture cheeks or lips if the victim moved wrong. Others had jagged edges designed to cut the corners of the mouth. The goal wasn't just silence. It was permanent reminder of what happened to women who stepped out of line. The really twisted part? Husbands could request this punishment for their wives. Church officials could order it for women who disrupted services. Even neighbors could make accusations that led to the bridle. It was community-sanctioned silencing with a medieval twist. Recovery wasn't guaranteed either. The metal could cause infections where it pressed against skin. Tongue injuries sometimes never healed properly, leaving permanent speech problems. Some women developed lasting jaw disorders from the forced positioning. Most survived the Brank's bridle physically, but the social damage was devastating. Everyone in town had seen them muzzled like animals. The message was clear. Female voices were dangerous and needed controlling. But if you thought having your speech literally caged was rock bottom, medieval punishment was just getting warmed up. Wait until you see what they did to handle the town drunks. The ducking stool seems almost quaint compared to what drunkards faced in medieval Europe. Enter the barrel pillory, a punishment so ridiculous it sounds like comedy until you realize people actually died in these things. Here's how it worked. Town authorities grabbed an old oak barrel, cut holes for your arms and legs, then forced you inside like some twisted jack-in-the-box. Your head poked out the top, arms and legs stuck out the sides, and your torso remained trapped inside this wooden prison. The barrel became your personal hell for hours or sometimes days. But wait, it gets worse. Once you're stuffed inside, they didn't just leave you there to contemplate your poor life choices. They made you parade through the streets while townspeople jeered, threw garbage, and generally treated you like a carnival attraction. Every step was agony. The rough wood scraped against your skin. Your back cramped from the unnatural position. Your legs barely supported the barrel's weight. The real nightmare? You couldn't control basic bodily functions. When nature called, you had nowhere to go except inside the barrel. So you marched through town sitting in your own waste, the smell getting worse with every step. Medieval people weren't exactly known for their hygiene standards, but even they found this disgusting. Then there's the medical reality. Prolonged confinement in these barrels caused serious skin infections. The combination of waste, sweat, and rough wood created perfect conditions for bacteria. Some victims developed open sores that took months to heal. Others got infections that spread through their bloodstream. The psychological damage lasted even longer. Small medieval communities never forgot who got the barrel treatment. Your reputation was permanently stained, literally and figuratively. People crossed the street to avoid you. Business partnerships dissolved, marriage prospects vanished, all because you had one too many ales and caused a scene. Different regions had their own twisted variations. Some barrels had spikes on the inside just to make things more uncomfortable. Others were deliberately made too small, forcing victims into even more painful positions. German towns sometimes added weights to make the barrel heavier, turning the parade into a grueling endurance test. The weird part is how popular these punishments became. Town squares would fill with spectators whenever someone got barrel treatment. Kids followed the victim around like it was a parade. Vendors sold food and drinks to the crowd. Public humiliation had become entertainment. Most people survived the barrel pillory, but not unscathed. The physical pain healed eventually. The shame never really did. Medieval justice aimed to break your spirit as much as punish your body, and the barrel accomplished both goals perfectly. What's truly disturbing is how creative medieval authorities became with their punishments. They weren't content with simple solutions when elaborate torture devices could send stronger messages. Speaking of sending messages, some punishments went far beyond public humiliation and temporary discomfort. They ventured into territory where survival became genuinely questionable, and psychological torture reached levels that would haunt victims for whatever remained of their lives. The barrel pillory might sound almost quaint after some of the horrors we've covered, but medieval communities had a twisted sense of creativity when it came to public shaming. This particular punishment was reserved for drunkards, and trust me, it wasn't just about standing around looking silly. Here's how it worked. Authorities would take a large oak barrel and cut holes in strategic places, one for the head, two for the arms. The drunk would be forced inside this makeshift prison, leaving their limbs sticking out like a grotesque jack-in-the-box. But the real torture hadn't even started yet. The victim couldn't move properly, couldn't sit down, couldn't escape. Their body was completely trapped in this wooden cage. And here's where things got genuinely nasty. They had to relieve themselves right there in the barrel. No bathroom breaks, no privacy, no dignity whatsoever. Then came the parade. Town officials would force the barrel-bound drunk to stumble through the streets while crowds gathered to laugh, point, and throw whatever they had handy. Rotten vegetables were popular, but some folks got creative with their projectiles. The smell alone must have been overwhelming. A mixture of old wine, human waste, and whatever the crowd decided to add to the mix. The physical pain was real. Standing cramped in that position for hours caused severe muscle cramps. The wooden edges dug into their torso. Some victims developed painful sores where the barrel rubbed against their skin. The weight of the barrel made walking nearly impossible, leading to countless falls and bruises. But the psychological damage might have been worse. Medieval society was all about reputation and social standing. Being paraded around town in your own filth while neighbors laughed was social suicide. Many people never recovered their standing in the community. Some moved to different towns just to escape the shame. Medical complications were surprisingly common. The unsanitary conditions led to skin infections that could turn serious fast. The restricted breathing from being hunched over in the barrel sometimes caused fainting spells. A few unlucky souls actually suffocated when they collapsed and couldn't get proper airflow. The punishment typically lasted anywhere from a few hours to an entire day, depending on how drunk you'd been and how much the local magistrate wanted to make an example. Repeat offenders got extended sentences, and some communities added extra humiliations like making the person wear the barrel for multiple days. What made this punishment particularly cruel was how it combined physical discomfort with maximum social humiliation. Medieval people understood that sometimes destroying someone's reputation was more effective than just causing physical pain. The barrel pillory accomplished both goals perfectly. Most victims survived, though they carried the shame for years. The physical wounds healed, but the social scars lasted much longer. Friends avoided them. Business opportunities dried up. Marriage prospects disappeared. The barrel pillory proves medieval justice was designed to break people down completely. But if you think social humiliation and cramped conditions were brutal, wait until you hear about our next punishment, where victims were displayed like animals and left at nature's mercy. The barrel pillory was annoying. The scold's bridle was painful. But when medieval authorities really wanted answers, they brought out something that turned human bodies into taffy. The rack didn't just punish people, it transformed them into completely different shapes. Here's how this nightmare worked. You'd be dragged into a dungeon and forced onto a wooden table about 6 feet long. Your wrists got tied to ropes at one end, your ankles to ropes at the other end. Those ropes connected to wooden rollers operated by handles. 2 executioners would start turning those handles in opposite directions. Slowly, deliberately. Your body began stretching like a piece of dough. The genius of the rack wasn't speed, it was patience. Medieval torturers understood that gradual pressure created maximum psychological terror. They'd turn the rollers just a quarter turn, then stop. Ask their questions. Turn again. Stop again. Your joints would start separating millimeter by millimeter. First, your shoulders would pop out of their sockets with sounds everyone in the room could hear. Then your hips. Your spine would begin elongating in ways God never intended. But here's the truly twisted part about this device. The rack was designed to keep you conscious through everything. Unlike other punishments that kill quickly, this one wanted you awake and talking. Medieval records showed that victims could be stretched an additional 4 to 6 inches beyond their normal height. Think about that for a second, your entire skeleton getting pulled apart like a telescope extending. The psychological torture often broke people before the physical damage became permanent. Just being strapped to that table, hearing those wooden gears creak, watching the executioner's hands move toward the handles, that was enough to make most prisoners confess to anything. Witchcraft, treason, heresy, crimes they never committed. The rack had this reputation that preceded it into every dungeon. Different countries had their own variations too. The Spanish added spikes to their racks. The French built theirs with additional pulleys for extra stretching power. English racks were reportedly the most efficient, capable of dislocating every major joint in under an hour. Competition in medieval torture technology was apparently a real thing. Survival rates were technically possible, but came with a catch. If you lived through a racking session, you'd never walk normally again. Your arms wouldn't reach the same distances. Your legs couldn't support your weight properly. Medieval medical knowledge couldn't repair what the rack destroyed. Survivors became living advertisements for the device's effectiveness. The rack served another purpose beyond extracting confessions. It was psychological warfare against entire populations. Everyone knew someone who'd been racked. Everyone had heard those stories whispered in taverns and marketplaces. The mere existence of the device kept people in line better than any army could. What made this punishment particularly cruel was its precision. Executioners could control exactly how much damage they inflicted. They could stop just before permanent injury or continue until bones cracked like kindling. Yet even the rack's methodical brutality pales compared to what awaits at our final level. When medieval authorities wanted to send the ultimate message, they chose something that made the rack look almost merciful. We've reached the end of our medieval punishment journey, and honestly, there's no way to sugarcoat what's coming. Flaying wasn't just torture, it was a deliberate act of turning a human being into a living nightmare. The executioner would start with small, precise cuts along the arms or legs, using a razor-sharp knife to separate skin from muscle. Each slice had to be perfect. Too deep and the victim died too quickly. Too shallow and the skin wouldn't peel properly. The process could take hours, sometimes days. Medieval records from various European courts describe executioners who took pride in their skill, keeping victims conscious and aware while systematically removing their outer layer of protection. The pain defied description because human language wasn't designed to capture that level of agony. But here's the truly horrifying part. Some victims remained lucid throughout the entire ordeal. Their nervous system, now completely exposed, sent constant signals of unbearable pain to their brain. Every breath of air felt like fire. Every drop of blood that fell was another step closer to inevitable death. The worst cases involved flaying that started at the feet and worked upward. This method, used in particularly brutal executions, meant the victim watched their own body being systematically destroyed. Medieval chroniclers wrote about condemned prisoners who begged for immediate death rather than face this punishment. Many bit their own tongues off trying to end their suffering faster. What made flaying especially cruel was its dual purpose. Sure, it killed the victim, but that wasn't the main goal. This punishment served as the ultimate deterrent. Authorities would display the removed skin as a warning to others. Some medieval churches still have human skin stretched across their doors, a grisly reminder of justice served centuries ago. The psychological impact on witnesses was equally devastating. Entire communities would be traumatized by watching flaying executions. Children would have nightmares for years. Adults developed what we now recognize as PTSD symptoms. Medieval society understood this psychological warfare and used it deliberately. Death usually came from blood loss, shock, or infection. The human body simply cannot survive without its protective skin barrier. Exposed muscle tissue becomes infected within hours. Blood pressure drops catastrophically as fluids leak from the body. Even if somehow rescued mid-punishment, no victim could survive the massive trauma. Medieval records show flaying was reserved for the most serious crimes: treason, heresy, or particularly brutal murders. The punishment matched the perceived severity of the offense. Authorities wanted everyone to understand that certain acts would result in consequences worse than death itself. Different regions developed their own variations. Some used specialized tools designed specifically for skin removal. Others preferred simple knives. The end result was always the same: a death so terrible that even hardened medieval populations found it difficult to watch. From public humiliation in the stocks to this ultimate horror, medieval justice operated on fear. Each punishment sent a clear message about society's boundaries. Medieval times were brutal, but flaying represented humanity at its absolute worst, turning death into an art form of suffering.